Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and did Agatha All Along's finale give us a peek into Marvel Studios' Mutant Saga Beyond Secret Wars? The final line of "Let's go find Tommy" as Wiccan and Ghost Agatha step into the light, which is really the closest thing this series gets to a post-credit scene tease, and Joe Locke even underlined its importance by an all-important Instagram post. This was a call to adventure for all of us to look ahead to a new corner of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We also got cryptic close-ups of Tommy Shepard's tragic origin, which has all the markings of and the themes that Marvel Studios will explore with the Mutant Saga. That plus a big fat X on Wiccan's arm raised the question, are Billy Kaplan and Tommy Shepard mutants? Well, in the comics, sorta. It's not totally clear, but in this video, I'm gonna clear it up. The mutant status of these characters from the comics and explain the long and winding road Wanda Maximoff's mutant status has taken, and just put it all in the context of the approach Marvel Studios is probably gonna take with these young characters as they make their plans for the X-Men in the MCU. Would Agatha really just set up a search for Tommy only for like a Vision Ultron series that seemed like it would have nothing to do with? Or is this an even bigger question? A question that could only have a big fat answer of the MCU X-Men. So let's connect the dots between Agatha and Tommy and Kamala Khan and the mutant gene of the MCU and explain how this is less about Young Avengers and Secret Wars than it probably is about Charles Xavier's Mutant Academy, an X-Men series that must come to Disney Plus in 2027. Do it, you cowards! Now, one detail that I pointed out in our Easter egg breakdown of Agatha's final 2 episodes is that Billy's Wiccan costume that he appears wearing in episode 8 has a ton of Easter eggs hidden into the suit by the Agatha costumer Daniel Cellon, including runes stitched into the seams and fabric from Wanda's protective hex within the hex in the WandaVision finale, specifically some stitching in the shape of Wanda's crown and Vision's Mind Stone, also blue leather fabric that came from the patch on Billy's jeans that he was wearing throughout the season, a red cape that was meant to come from his jumper that he had bled into after being wounded in episode 4, and this cape was printed to have the texture of Wanda's Scarlet Witch suit for Multiverse of Madness, and on the inside the texture of Vision's cape, and interestingly the X in a circle on Billy's sleeve. Now this X within a circle could be one of the aforementioned runes. We just didn't see any of Wanda's runes that looked quite like this, and in anything Marvel, an X in a circle is an undeniable nod to the X-Men. The thing is, we just cannot always trust that Easter eggs hidden into costumes by the wardrobe designers hold a ton of narrative weight for the future of the franchise. Like in Moon Knight episode 3, on the back of a jean jacket of a criminal in Cairo is a depiction of Pharaoh Ramatut, aka Kang, specifically from Mike Del Mundo's art in 2017's Avengers Kang War number 4. Obviously, in 2022, Kang was still a big part of Marvel's plans for the future, but that Moon Knight costumer probably didn't have a specific insight into how Moon Knight or Ramatut would connect to the future. And let's not forget the spiderweb skirt of that girl we all thought was Gwen Stacy in Avengers Endgame. It was not Gwen Stacy, it was just an extra who found a really cool skirt from Hot Topic. But this X on Billy's sleeve is at least some corroborating evidence for where these characters might be headed. Specifically, the bigger moment from these final 2 episodes when, in the final trial, the Earth trial in that morgue, Agatha helps Billy locate a new body for the soul of Billy's brother, Tommy, to transport into from a nebulous void space after the collapse of Wanda's Westview Hex, which we should note happened 3 years earlier. So for like 3 years, Tommy has existed somewhere out there just in the form of some disembodied hexagonal red shapes floating around in a black inky void. And whatever this magic is transports into the body of a boy who's being bullied nearly to death via some drowning incident.
There's a boy! It's a prank! They tricked him! He's gonna drown! It's a bad place!
So where is this? What's going on here? In the breakdown, I suggested it was at like a summer camp lake. It certainly has vibes of Jason Voorhees and Camp Crystal Lake. Now, yes, the water does look bluer, brighter, clearer, and I guess more chlorinated than a typical lake does, but you can see a tree line in the background. It just kind of seems like we're not at like a community pool, but you know, kind of like something where kids go more unsupervised. Like either there is no lifeguard or there is a lifeguard who should be fired for letting a kid be held down this long. But whether it's a lake or a pool, it's some kind of social gathering where a bunch of kids are swimming, and one kid was wearing a shirt and shoes that were not aqua socks, and shirts that were not the kind of shirts that I wore because I was self-conscious about my body as a kid. This kid could not swim and did not intend on swimming and was, according to Billy, pranked and tricked and then pushed into the water and held down to the point of drowning. These bullies killed this boy. His body would not have been open for Tommy's soul to go into had they not succeeded in ending his life. So while Billy is worried that he killed some kids so that his brother could live, really what he should feel bad about is letting these asshole bullies avoid criminal prosecution and juvenile detention for drowning a kid. This is exactly the kind of youth bullying situation that Marvel Studios has rarely explored as a point of view story. And since it ends with the death of a child, it's a moment that doesn't pull any punches. They are going to come back to this. Thanks to True Classic for sponsoring this video. We are getting dangerously close to that time of year when the ugly sweaters in our closets start feeling like good ideas again. But why do we have ugly clothes in the first place? Particularly when True Classic makes having comfortable, good-looking clothes more affordable than ever. True Classic sells t-shirts, hoodies, and jeans that are perfect additions to any wardrobe. For me, I've been wearing this True Classic t-shirt all the time. It is so soft, and I can't tell you when you are just stuck in LA traffic and you're just like wearing a bad shirt, how much of a difference that experience can be. Just having the right softness of a shirt, like this True Classic shirt, it makes all the difference in my mood when I'm coming home or headed to work, wherever I'm going. True Classic also has a ton of bundles and multi-pack options. So if you find a shirt you like, it's easy to double down and get your wardrobe that much more dialed in. The holidays are here, and True Classic's ultra comfortable, perfect fitting essentials make for the perfect gift for you and the men in your life. So if you're ready to upgrade your closet, shop now and unlock big savings during their huge holiday sale. Just go to my exclusive link at trueclassic.com/newrockstars to save. That's trueclassic.com/newrockstars. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. End the year with holiday cheer thanks to True Classic. My theory is that we are glimpsing into the kind of story Marvel Studios will explore in the upcoming Mutant Saga after Avengers Secret Wars, and a slate of series and films starting in 2027 following the new era of X-Men. The MCU has largely until now avoided stories about youth bullying. I mean, just look at the way they've approached Peter Parker. The story of Peter Parker begins very much as one about bullying. This was a huge focus in the first acts of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and Mark Webb's Spider-Man, but in John Watts' MCU Spider-Man Homecoming, the worst bullying that Tom Holland's Peter Parker faces is some non-violent name-calling from Flash Thompson.
When I say penis, you say Parker! Penis! Parker! Penis! Parker!
It's not nice, but it's not like Joe Manganiello punching right past your head and denting a locker.
Think you're pretty funny, don't you, freak?
And this bullying doesn't really affect Peter. He just kind of lets it brush off his sleeve while he goes and builds a Lego Death Star with Ned. And Peter throughout the movie dunks on Flash because this is an academic magnet school. And Flash ends up very quickly having to submit to Peter joining that academic decathlon team and respecting Peter. Now in Iron Man 3, we met Harley Keener, who told Tony Stark that he had a bully at school named EJ, but we never really got to saw him go to school. In fact, by the end of that movie, he gets some pretty powerful potato guns that he's going to go crazy. So really, I start feeling bad for EJ. And then in Ms. Marvel, we meet Kamala Khan, who had a school bully named Zoe Zimmer. But in the Disney Plus series, they really downplayed Zoe's bullying quite a bit compared to the character in G. Willow Wilson's comics. Zoe in the comics is awful. In the show, she's not nearly as bad. I think the reason Marvel has held back on this is that this is the kind of bullying and oppression, especially among kids, that we most associate with the stories of mutants in the Marvel comics. And that could contextualize why they're approaching Kamala the way they have. By the end of Ms. Marvel, we learn that Marvel Studios retconned the MCU version of Kamala Khan as a mutant.
Kamala, there's something different in your genes, like a mutation.
Now, of course, Kamala Khan was not a mutant in the Marvel comics. She was an Inhuman. But G. Willow Wilson, who authored Kamala Khan's initial run, said that she always wanted to establish the character as a mutant, but Marvel Comics at the time were ordered not to introduce any new mutant characters or X-Men characters because the film rights to those characters were still owned by Fox. And Marvel then CEO Ike Perlmutter felt the company would not be able to profit from films and toy sales from those X-Men characters. Arguably, that's the reason the Inhumans were even created to begin with. But now that Marvel Studios has regained the film rights to the X-Men, this is no longer an issue. And Kamala can be a mutant in the MCU. And I think that signals the approach Marvel Studios might be taking with Billy Kaplan and Tommy Shepard. Now, it is debated whether Billy and Tommy, starting from their Young Avengers era as Wiccan and Speed, are biological mutants, i.e. they possess the mutant gene. Wiccan and Speed share a cosmic link to Wanda Maximoff. Their reincarnated forms to Jeff and Rebecca Kaplan and to Frank and Mary Shepard only have their powers because they inherited them, I guess you could say multiversally, from the Scarlet Witch. But there's always been a question over one can multiversally inherit a gene genealogical mutant status, and if their powers are really the product of an X gene that runs through their DNA. There have been a few moments in which Wiccan and Speed were implied to be X-Men, either as future prospective members, like as Emma Frost called them at one point, or in the case of the Battle of the Atom storyline, a future Sorcerer Supreme version of Wiccan tells Wolverine that he's also one of the X-Men. But we should also note that not all X-Men are mutants. Technically, Juggernaut, Kane Marco, despite being the half-brother to Charles Xavier, is not himself a mutant. His powers come from the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak, not a mutant gene. For what it's worth, Wiccan and Speed also show up to Magneto's trial on Krakoa as his grandsons through their maternal lineage through the Scarlet Witch, and Wanda is Magneto's daughter. So many people deduce from that, well, if they took the time to go to a grandfather's trial, and that grandfather is one of the most famous mutants through a mother who would also be a mutant, does that not make them also mutants? I have always felt that the implication of those comics X-Men moments is that Wiccan and Speed are mutant enough, even if the comics never really come back to the subject. And that the only reason Young Avengers and Children's Crusade didn't explore more of their mutant heritage is the fact that, you know, Ike Perlmutter had that weird rule for all of Marvel Comics at the time. Further complicating this is whether Wanda Maximoff still counts as a mutant. Most people believe yes. When she was first introduced, it was as a member of Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. It's just other comics, later on, would retcon Wanda's parentage through Magneto and have implied that her powers come not from a mutant gene, but from a curse from Kafan. Also through like a backstory with the High Evolutionary. But the MCU version of Wanda Maximoff was not at first referred to as a mutant. That would be because in 2015 in Avengers Age of Ultron, the rights to the mutant versions of the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were at Fox, and for Wanda and Pietro to even appear in the Marvel Studios Age of Ultron film, Marvel Studios and Fox had to come to this deal where the characters could not be introduced as members of the Avengers, that the Magneto connection could never be mentioned, and that the word mutant could never be said. That's why Joss Whedon came up with the workaround of the Avengers calling Wanda and Pietro enhanced. And then in WandaVision, Wanda and Pietro's parents were identified as Oleg and Irina Maximoff of Sokovia. Now, we don't know if that's the case in all universes, like in the 838 universe, where there exists another version of Wanda Maximoff, as well as a Patrick Stewart Charles Xavier, and presumably from that, other X-Men. But also in WandaVision episode 8, Wanda, at a young age, before she knew she had powers, presumably, was able to cast a low-level probability hex to keep that Stark warhead from exploding in their living room. This was before Wanda's powers were enhanced with exposure to an Infinity Stone. It was implied that this was an ability that she had from birth, and something brought on by this traumatic event, as is commonly the case with most mutants. Now, the WandaVision finale and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness suggested that Wanda's magic was part of her destiny, something that she was born with, just kind of prophesied by the demon Chthon and the Darkhold from ancient times. And they didn't really explain much beyond that. I think there is enough of an opening for the MCU to formally codify Wanda Maximoff as a mutant. No one's gonna flip their shit if they decide that. Even in the past year on X-Men 97, in the season finale, Magneto, with Charles in the astral plane, looks out at his family on a boat in the raging sea, and his children, Wanda and Pietro, are there. I've speculated that Agatha All Along's decision to establish William Kaplan as an aspiring magician, as a living boy before Billy Maximoff's soul took over his body, suggests that they wanted the vessel body to be primed to accept the soul. So it wouldn't just be like a random body that the soul took over, it would be a kid with a specific predisposition that makes them a natural fit for the conceptual child that Wanda conjured out of her grief to take over. If that applies to Thomas Shepard as well, that bullied kid who was drowned, something about him must make him a natural fit for a Hex soul who considers himself a speedster. Maybe they're gonna go the Forrest Gump approach and suggest that poor Thomas Shepard, as a target of bullying, was a kid who just kept running. So we have to ask why Tommy Shepard was being bullied so much that these asshole kids were drowning him. Why Billy described him as such a runaway, that he didn't have a family or anyone who loved him. Does that not sound like a Marvel mutant? Thematically, this is the kind of story Marvel needs to explore in the upcoming Mutant Saga. We need to see the MCU address what happens when kids in this world are born with gifts that make them different from each other. We need our biggest franchise to explore why we are so afraid of each other, why we dehumanize each other, and why we fortify ourselves within tribal corners. So when Agatha All Along ends with this "where is Tommy" question, we gotta ask, is the best answer to that question going to come in a Young Avengers series, or a Champion series, or a Children's Crusade series? Or if these characters would just be given little more than a bit cameo and far too little screen time in Avengers Secret Wars? Or could Billy and Tommy and Kamala Khan be the gateway characters in the most highly anticipated phase of the Marvel franchise, as they meet characters like live action forms of Jubilation Lee, Roberto da Costa, as all of them are incoming students at an MCU Mutant Academy? Comment down below with your thoughts on this. You can follow me at EA Voss, subscribe to all 3 channels in the new Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.